This from the Huffington Post. George Bush's book, Decision Points, lifted passages from other advisors' books. The Huffington Post is reporting that when Crown Publishing inked a deal with George W. Bush for his memoirs, the publisher knew it wasn't getting Faulkner. But the book, at least, promised gripping, never-before-heard detail about the former president's key decisions, offering to bring readers aboard Air Force One on 9/11 in the hours after America's most devastating attack since Pearl Harbor, at the head of the table in the Situation Room in the moments before launching the war in Iraq and other undisclosed and weighty locations. Crown also got a mashup of worn-out anecdotes from previously published memoirs written by his subordinates, from which Bush lifts quotes word for word, passing them off as his own recollections. He took equal license in lifting from nonfiction books about his presidency, or newspapers or magazine articles from the time. Far from shedding light on how the president approached these crucial decision points during his presidency, the clip job illuminates something shallower and less surprising about Bush's character. He is too lazy to write his own memoir. More on Mr. Bush in a moment. Major cuts to social programs coming to the United States. Is austerity measures going to be inflicted upon just the middle class and lower income earners? Here are some combined reports from the web. The leader of Obama's Deficit Commission sparked criticism Wednesday for proposing broad cuts to federal programs. But the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform has also come under attack for its unusual approach to staffing. Many of its employees aren't employed by the panel at all. Instead, about 1 in 4 commission staffers is paid by outside entities, many which have strong ideological points of view about how to tackle a deficit. And you guessed it, none of them include the rich paying their fair share. The outsourcing has come under sharp criticism from seniors, organizations, and liberal activists, who say the strategy is part of a broader conservative bias favoring painful entitlement cuts over other solutions. The fears of some liberal groups appeared to come true Wednesday when the Commission's 2 leaders recommended some significant reductions to Social Security and other social welfare programs. Not surprisingly, most cuts are targeted to the middle class and lower income earners. Among their suggestions, reducing Social Security payments to the well-off, limiting how much mortgage interest and charity donations you can write off, a higher gas tax, a third fewer military bases overseas. While cutting the number of military bases overseas seems like a good way to save money, most of the cost savings will be absorbed by the increased costs in operating larger bases that are left, and funding black operations around the world. And we're back. As promised, more about former President Bush. U.S. must begin criminal investigations of torture following Bush admission. In a press release to worldwide hippies this week, Amnesty International urged a criminal investigation into the role of former U.S. President George W. Bush and other officials in the use of enhanced interrogation techniques against detainees held in secret U.S. custody after the former president admitted authorizing their use. In his memoirs published last week and in an interview on NBC News broadcast on November 8th, the former president confirmed his personal involvement in authorizing waterboarding and other techniques against high-value detainees. Under international law, the former president's admission to having authorized acts that amount to torture are enough to trigger the USA's obligation to investigate his admissions and, if substantiated, to prosecute him, said Claudio Cordone, Senior Director of Amnesty International. In his admissions, also highlighted once again the absence of accountability for the crimes under international law of torture and enforced disappearances committed by the USA, he said. In his memoirs, former President Bush focused on the cases of 2 detainees held in the secret program. Abu Zabudiah was held at various undisclosed locations from April 2002 to September 2006. In August 2002, he was subjected to waterboarding, in which water is used to begin the process of drowning. This was done more than 80 times. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was arrested on March 1, 2003 in Pakistan and transferred to secret CIA custody. That same month, he was waterboarded 183 times, according to a report by the CIA Inspector General. After 3.5 years of being held incommunicado in solitary confinement in secret locations, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was transferred to a military custody in Guantanamo, where he and Abu Zabudiya remained held without trial, along with more than 150 others. Waterboarding was far from the only technique alleged to have been used against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Abu Zabudiya, and others held in the secret program that violated the international prohibition of torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment. Other techniques included prolonged nudity, threats, exposure to cold temperatures, stress positions, physical assault, prolonged use of shackles, and sleep. Under international law, anybody involved in torture must be brought to justice, and that does not exclude former President George W. Bush. If his admissions are substantiated, the USA has an obligation to prosecute him, said Claudio Cardone. In the absence of a U.S. investigation, other states must step in and carry out such an investigation themselves, said Claudio. Here is some background. The USA ratified the UN Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel and Inhuman or Degrading Treatment of Punishment in 1994. Under UNCAT, in every case where there is evidence against a person of their having committed or attempted to commit torture, or of having committed acts which constitute complicity or participation in torture, the case must be submitted to its competent authorities for the purpose of prosecution. Failing to proceed with a prosecution on the basis that the accused held public office of any rank, or citing justifications based on exceptional circumstances, whether states of war or other public emergency, is not permitted by UNCAT. In another development last week, the U.S. Department of Justice announced that no one will face criminal charges for the destruction by the CIA in 2005 of nearly 100 videotapes made of interrogations. 12 of the tapes depicted use of enhanced interrogation techniques, including waterboarding. Again, torture and enforced disappearances are crimes under international law. As such, the destruction of the tapes may have concealed government crimes. In a brief statement released on November 9th, however, the Department of Justice announced that after an exhaustive investigation into the matter, a federal prosecutor has concluded that he would not pursue criminal charges for the destruction of the interrogation tapes.
Worldwide Hippies needs your help. Site creators are searching for volunteer correspondents from around the world to check in weekly and report the news and views in your country. Contact the site creator if you're interested. We need your help to make Worldwide Hippies truly worldwide.